Oh, hello there. I don't know how you got access to my journal, but since you have it, it means I am probably dead. And this is the story of my last few days of life. I woke up in the midst of nowhere, having a very tall man in a suit talking to me about something I didn't really comprehend. After a few more words, he disappeared, and I found myself alone, except for a man who looked relatively like a pig. I tried to approach him, but he just kind of seemed to run away from me. I tried once again to talk to him, but he wouldn't be having any of it, so I left on my own, figuring I was alone in this endeavor. After that, I began collecting grass and saplings for sticks and pieces of dry grass, figuring that I could probably use them for fire making and probably some form of crafting later on. Figuring I didn't see any other buildings other than the strange man's house, I figured I'd probably be sleeping outside for a little while. I also encountered what appeared to be a spider's nest. I wasn't sure if it was still living spiders in it, so I walked up to it. At first it seems fine, but upon getting closer, one popped out and started to chase me. I managed to get away from it pretty quick, because it was a rather slow-moving spider, and also it didn't want to stray too far from its camp. And also, I had gotten a piece of flint, so I made myself an axe to chop trees, also as a way to defend myself in case the spider decided to come back. But, for the most part, I just used it for cutting trees. The tree fell down in only 16 swings of my axe, which I found very interesting, and probably is a new world record for a tree of that size. However, I didn't complain as it made the work much easier and a lot less straining on my body. I found some berry bushes and decided to pick those, and I also found a dead corpse. I figured it was better him than me, and also he left behind a marble suit. It was in a bit of a poor condition, and it's also very heavy to wear, so I just put it in my pocket for now. I reached the grasslands that was full of grass and rabbits. I picked grass because I like grass, and by that I don't mean cannabis, I just mean the actual grass. So after gathering a bit more grass, I proceeded on. There was a little bit of a path there, so I took that for a while as I appeared to walk faster. It led me to some berry bushes again, so I decided to pick those, figuring I could use those as food tonight in case I couldn't find a better alternative. There were also carrots on the ground every now and again that I'd find. However, I didn't trust the random carrots, and I figured if they were okay, then I'd just save them for later, seeing as they'd probably be fine in the ground. I encountered what appeared to be a stone land bridge. I became quite fond of it, and figured I'd probably return to it later for a base camp. It was nice and clear. Across the bridge there was a strange touchstone thing. I touched it and it grew bigger. I have no idea what it was for, but I'd leave it. I then encountered a wild beefalo. Me and him stared at each other for a while, as I scratched my side a few times. He didn't seem to move at all, he just completely stared straight at me. I decided to name him Colonel. Not Colonel as in like popcorn, I mean Colonel spelled colonel, if you know what I mean. He also had a piece of manure next to him, and I decided to avoid that because it smelled bad, and personally I had no use for it. I headed to the west, and eventually I found another beefalo. Seeing that this area was quite heavily populated with them, and that would probably be useful in case I needed meat or for some reason fur or manure. I crafted a pickaxe, remembering that I had gone to pickaxe making class in college. I figured I could use those to gather some rocks, as they could always be useful in our camping trip. I opened up my map, remembering that I had spawned with one, and found that it would continually open and close. However, then I figured out how to open it, and I looked at it. It seemed to be drawing itself as I walked on. I figured it was drawing itself because I had no cartography skills, nor any memory of actually drawing anything on this map. I saw some more beefalos to the north, and decided to head back down on the path, figuring I was probably going to be wasting my time just wandering the grasslands. That, and it was getting dark, and I probably needed a place to spend the night. I headed down the path, collecting seeds that I don't remember being there before, and headed back to my rock bridge. I figured I would probably set up a fire here, but I still had a bit of daylight left, so I figured I'd spend the rest of the day collecting materials. Grabbed a few more pieces of grass that I could probably use for the fire. I also found my first rock. I mined away at it, and after a couple swings, it had crumbled into its individual components of flint, rocks, and niter. except that piece of grass was in the way, so I had to pick that first before I could pick up the rocks. I left the niter on the ground, seeing as I had no current use for it, nor any idea what I could actually use it for. Being a man of science, I figured I could figure it out eventually, but I wasn't too worried about it now. I attacked another tall evergreen tree, and strangely enough it took the exact same number of swings to knock this tree down as it did the last one. I picked up the logs and saplings, and then attacked a smaller tree. This one, however, only took 10 swings. I found it strange how all these trees appear to be falling in numbers divisible by 5, at a ratio of 1 to 5 with its size. I then found myself trying to attack birds, but it didn't get me anywhere. Figured it was worth a shot, though. Just the taste of meat would be quite enticing, I guess you could say. I then gathered more supplies until it began to get too dark. I also found some more berries, and a beehive, which I also decided to stay away from. As it grew dark, I headed back to my camp, figuring now would be a good time to start a campfire. I would probably set down a more permanent fire later, but for now I did not have the materials to build a proper one. So I just built a little temporary campfire, and slid it right down in the middle of my camp. I figured now would probably be a good time to start cooking some of my food that I had gotten. But for now I was just making sure that I was alone. That pigman wasn't trying to attack me in the midst of the night. I put some berries over the fire, and they burnt. However, they did taste better than regular berries, I guess you could say. Just more burnt. I left 2 of them though, figuring I wasn't hungry enough to eat all 6 bunches of berries. After that, I put my axe down because holding my hand up with an axe in my hand was starting to get tired. I spent the rest of the night just kind of staring into the fire. I wanted to go to sleep, but I just could not get myself to lay down on the hard ground. So I ended up just sitting there all night, staring directly into the fire. I found myself thinking about a match of tennis, and how the noise of the ball tapping against the rackets of the players and then against the ground, and just that rhythmic sound that it made, going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. At this time I realized that my fire was starting to shrink, and I should probably do something about that. I figured I'd have enough flammable materials, and I figured I should probably put something down so that it would survive me the rest of the night, as I did not want to be in the pitch blackness. Took a look at my inventory and tried to figure out what would make the most sense to burn. I eventually decided upon the pine cones. I looked at them for a second. They seemed so sweet and innocent, like an unborn tree, and then I put them in the fire, because I didn't care. After that, instead of looking at the fire, I looked at the darkness, watching it slowly grow closer and closer to my camp. But it didn't matter. I saw the sun rising in the horizon, and I knew day would be there eventually. As the fire grew smaller and smaller, I began to get nervous as to wondering my predictions were right about morning coming. However, eventually the sun did in fact rise, and I was fine. With a bit of a lag spike, I was back. I tried to get some seeds that a crow was eating, however he didn't make it in time. Not that I'd want half-eaten seeds anyways. I saw something above me that said saving flash by, and I had no idea what it was talking about, so I ignored it. And I began heading north on this road, trying to see what I could see. The grass all turned very brown and ugly, and also the path ended. I found myself heading into another rocky outcrop where I found a large quantity of stones and boulders. Also a very tall, ugly bird thing. It seemed to not like me very much, and I didn't really like it either because it was ugly. So I gathered up some more rocks, ignoring all the niter, figuring that maybe the bird would be less mad at me if I didn't take the niter. Gathered up the rest of the rocks into flint though, as that was the important stuff that I really needed. I also encountered a gold nugget in the rock, which I wasn't expecting. I figured that was probably a 1 in a million chance. But, you know, so was being stranded here in the middle of nowhere for no apparent reason. So I guess I should probably buy a lottery ticket if I ever get out of here. I mined up a couple rocks, getting the proper supplies that I needed, but then my pickaxe broke. I just stood there for a second, wondering why that happened. However, then I got over myself, and I made myself a new one. Gathering the rest of my rock supplies, I figured I had enough to make a proper fire, as well as probably a few other things. And I had enough flint to make the rest of my tools to last me a while, and I continued on. I found a darker area where rocks were already just kind of laying on the ground, so I decided to pick some of them up, figuring what else would they use them for, just sitting there. I found that the terrain changed colors very quickly, no matter which direction I went in. It's kind of strange. I encountered one piece of cobblestone road just sitting there in the middle of nowhere right beside the path. I had no idea what it was doing there, or whoever made that, or what their thinking was about. I encountered another one of those tall birds, and then a second one. Then I encountered a whole camp of them, scaring the crap out of me. One of them approached me and stabbed me with his beak. I hurt like the blazes, and I began to run. They had done quite a bit of damage on me, and a bunch of birds were chasing me, but I managed to get away, like, basically unharmed, ignoring that one piece. I found 2 pieces of cobblestone road separated by a river. I mined a rock, contemplating over my anger of those tall birds, and swearing my revenge upon them one day. I gathered up the rest of that rock supplies and continued heading west. Past a rabbit who was very scared to see me, and I checked the map. I saw where that evil tall bird nest was, and I figured I did not want to cross it again, so I figured I'd loop my way around and head back to camp, figuring that the day was starting to get late, and I didn't want to be out in the middle of the night. I found another random strip of cobblestone road and wondered what was wrong with people who made these things. Clearly there were some mental defects involved. I found another berry bush though, which was a stroke of luck. So now I'd be able to have at least 3 handfuls of berries tomorrow, or tonight, I guess you could say. I took out my axe and chopped down another tree within 15 chops as I expected. Maybe I was either getting good at predicting, or maybe I was just a really good natural woodcutter. However, I doubted both of those. I picked up a piece of stray grass that was just lying there in the midst of nowhere, and ignored the rock. And then I stepped in some mud. It was kind of gross, and it was just kind of sitting there. Don't know why. I stumbled upon what appeared to be a grave, and I saw a gold nugget nearby, which I figured was also kind of lucky, until I realized I had stumbled into a graveyard that was probably robbing these graves of their treasure. The graveyard was really spooky, but the gold made it totally worth it. I had a feeling the dead wouldn't mind, or even notice. I figured I could probably also dig up these graves if I felt like it. However, I'd need some sort of device to actually do that, as the axe wouldn't work. The sun was starting to set, and I head back to base again. I checked my map, realizing that I was still a bit of a distance away, but I wasn't worried, because I had more than enough time. I saw one of those tall birds sleeping. I walked up to it, having an urge to just take my axe to it and finish it off now, but I chose not to. And as I walked away, he woke up and began to chase me. However, I made it out of his terrain before he could even get close enough to peck me. So that was good. I continued walking along the coastline until I reached my base. I checked my map again just to make sure that I hadn't passed it, and I hadn't. I also picked a sapling on the way, figuring an extra stick was an extra stick for me. After crossing through the grasslands, I made it to my way to the stone bridge. I stood there and began to craft a proper fire, placing it right in the center of the camp. It was a nice permanent solution. And also I got some seeds as a reward from a passing by bird. He must have been proud of me. I circled the fire, making sure everything was ship-shape, and then I continued building. I constructed an old invention of mine, the science machine. It had a lever on it and a couple wheels that turned, and a funny-looking hat on it. I figured it could help me build plenty of new things. Well, actually, it didn't do anything. It was more just moral support and inspiration that it provided. Because, I mean, look at it. I mean, it looks like it could inspire you to do some science. Don't believe me? Buy one and find out. Only $19.95. 5 easy payments. I ended up prototyping what I call a shovel. It was a thing on a stick with a curved piece of flint on it, used for digging holes and digging up plants and stuff. Figuring I could have use for it. I saw that there were plenty other ideas floating through my head of things I could create. However, I didn't really think about them for right now, as I had to get food on. I ended up cooking the last of my berries, and then I began to eat. They were delicious, and I ate them all. I didn't feel fat or anything, because, I mean, they were just berries. I mean, berries are good for you, right? I picked up some more seeds, figuring I could use them as food as well. But then as I approached the science machine, I got the inspiration to actually plant these seeds. However, I'd need to make the proper farming plot for them, and that would require going out to the beefaloes and collecting manure. I wasn't too sure if I wanted to do that yet, because, I mean, that's kind of gross, right? I put my axe down and just kind of stared into the fire. I added some pine cones as well, as it hadn't even reached full night yet, and my fire was already beginning to die. I sat there and began to think about the politics of nature, realizing that everything in the world is just interesting. Whoa, hey, where are you going? I'm not done yet. Wait, come back.